I'm going to start with Make America Healthy Again, because Senator, you started the caucus in the U.S. Senate on Make America Healthy Again. You've been frequently referred to as a Maha whisperer to some of the movement folks, including Secretary Kennedy, who we wish we could have gotten him here. You really tried. I ran into Senator Marshall, even in Ireland. The first thing he said was, I'm still trying to get that to happen. But we know people have busy schedules. So tell us why you felt it was important to start this caucus in the Senate.
Okay, well, good morning, Sarah, and everybody. Let me just do a couple house cleaning things to say. So, Jamie, Farm Credit, thank you for what you do. And I'm especially grateful for your leadership in the farmer suicide issue. And I just want to remind folks that they could go to your website and find some resources for that. You could reach out, like K-State Extension does a great job coming and talking to ag groups about farmer suicide. We lose more farmers to suicide than we do farm accidents today. And this has been one of the issues I've tried to lead on as well. So thank you for your leadership there. And Sarah, we saw each other at Farmageddon, like the 117th continuous battle we've had going on all these days, and your Cyclones won again. So I thought we didn't make a bet, but I almost wore an Iowa State shirt just to get it out of my system.
Loved it.
I got to get it, I have to have some therapy here to get it out of our system. So now, what was the question about why Maha?
Why the caucus that you started and why you're interested in the movement?
Yeah, so 70% of Americans have a chronic disease now. 70% of Americans have a chronic disease. Think about heart disease and hypertension, obesity, diabetes, Alzheimer's, cancer, and mental illness. Our children, 20% of our children are on a prescription drug. 30% of our children are obese. 40% of our children have a chronic disease. So this nation is in worse health today than maybe forever, right? Since before antibiotics were invented. And we're going the wrong direction. So this is something that I've been interested in even before starting medical school, starting to work on and help start a wellness center as well. So in a world that's become basically a sick care system, my hope is to turn it to a healthcare system where we try to slow down what's causing these chronic diseases.
Can you explain a little bit about the difference between the effort on Make America Healthy Again and also you have the Food is Medicine caucus? It seems like there ought to be a lot of interaction between the two.
Yeah, so I think about that food is medicine is one component of MAHA to me. That certainly there is a huge nutritional component to making America healthy again. So that's one special place to start with, and I think really that's where we'll talk later. Probably at, where does agriculture meet healthy food as well? So I think food as medicine is part of it, and I think when you think about food as medicine, typically you think about a person that's already had a heart attack and think, oh gosh, maybe I had to lose some weight and start exercising and go on a nutrition diet. But I think MAHA, we're trying to start at ground zero from coming out of the womb, stressing that breastfeeding is very important and then going on through a nutritious, healthy diet and healthy lifestyles.
When we've talked before, you've said there's really these 4 key pillars underpinning the MAHA movement. Can you share a little bit more about those and how they interact?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, when I think about Make America Healthy Again, I think about healthy soil. So healthy soil leads to healthy food, and healthy soil is where agriculture meets healthy nutrition. So the first pillar to me is healthy soil and nutrition. The second pillar is decreasing the exposure to toxins, and whether that's in the water or the air. A third pillar is meaningful, affordable access to primary care. And that's something that Bernie Sanders and I, believe it or not, have been working on together for 3 or 4 years. Bernie and I have a very good professional relationship. We both agree that healthcare is too expensive, prescription drugs are too expensive, and many people don't have meaningful access to primary care. And then the third pillar is addressing this mental health epidemic in our children and young adults.
Thank you. So that's an underpinning of all this, and we've gone through the draft MAHA Commission report, and then we had the final version that came out that had been changed quite a bit to reflect, I think, your work in terms of educating people who are involved. A lot of farm groups weighed in to offer their comments. Can you walk us through some of the discussions without sharing too much behind the scenes, but maybe enough to whet all of our appetites about how did you help educate people from the first draft to the final product to address some of these things that are underpinning the MAHA Commission report?
Yeah, so, I think the first rendition of MAHA was written without much input from agriculture. But between the first one and the second one, over 250 agriculture groups went to the White House and spoke with the people writing that commission. Secretary Kennedy, Secretary Rollins, who's just been an incredible voice for agriculture, having more influence on what that second report was going to look like. And so it was an educational process of explaining, the difference between organic farming versus regenerative farming and some of the great things that we are doing in agriculture as well. So it is an education process. And I think the other thing, behind the scenes is just reminding people that 97% of rural America voted for President Trump. And the people that are writing the MAHA report work for President Trump. And President Trump said, we're going to make rural America a priority, and we cannot do anything to hurt agriculture. So I think when that first report came out, maybe there was some concern that it could have some negative impact on agriculture. And just something as simple as explaining. The other thing the president said was we're going to stop inflation too. So the people in this room know this, but most don't, that if we went to 100% so-called organic farming, the groceries would go up, 5, 10, 20 times. So I think there was a lot of education, and thank you to all the agriculture groups that made the effort to send folks to Washington and to be heard.
And just to be clear, there are some things that are happening through HHS that are included not only in the report, but that we're hearing a lot about these days. Some of the questioners are already asking about this. There was a concern about seed oils, which corn, canola, soybean oil. There's been a lot of research on that over the years. You have millions of acres in your state. So how do you clarify the position on seed oils and whether those are a risk, they need further research, or what's your position?
Right. As far as I know, there's nothing unhealthy about seed oils. I think that's the bottom line. And I think I try to do a lot of reading on folks that think differently and try to understand where they're coming from. But this is why we need the NIH and the CDC to do non-biased studies and figure it out. I do have concern about ultra-processed foods, which have a lot of seed oil in them. So I don't think it's the seed oil is the problem with the ultra-processed food. I think it's the salt and the sugar, the preservatives in them, that's the real problem that increases to an inflammatory process in our body. You think about Alzheimer's. I think we'll figure out one day that Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes. It's an inflammatory process by American diets of having too much sugar and salt in the diets. So I don't think it's the seed oil that's the culprit, but I'm certainly willing to start over, to do new studies, and they can't all be done by people that benefit from using the seed oil. So we need non-biased, reproducible studies. And I say reproducible. The way science is supposed to work is I do a study and it shows one thing. Instead of me repeating it, you try to get somebody else to repeat that science and then see if they confirm or deny what I found in my hypothesis.
And one of the other things that has come up as part of this discussion is that a lot of people who go to medical school never get nutrition training. Perhaps you did, but I know a lot of doctors who have not. There's been discussion within the administration about requiring more of that within medical schools. How do you see that unfolding and working in conjunction with medical training?
Right, so I did take a voluntary class. It wasn't graded. It was a Saturday morning for I don't know, 6 or 8 weeks. That type of thing was the only formal nutrition training we had. But in our residency program, so I'm an OB doctor, obviously, we had a diabetic clinic where I was taking care of pregnant diabetic. I mean, I would see 30 of them every Monday morning. So we learned a lot about nutrition there. So this is, I know that Secretary Kennedy and people think that that's going to be a magic sword, but it's not. I think that nurses are the ones that will solve this problem. I'd be much more investing money in nurses almost having a subspecialty. We can't have a PhD nutritionist in every clinic across the country, but they can coach up the nurses. So my solution to that is more nurses. Again, it's something Bernie Sanders and I have worked on, is more scholarships for nursing students as well as for the teachers. The teachers can make so much more money when they're not when they're out in the hospitals than teaching at a junior college, community college, excuse me. It was a junior college when I went to school there, but we call them community college and technical colleges now as well. And I think this is where people got it wrong too. I keep hearing people say, if we just had more education. Look, we're smarter than that. We know what's good to eat and what's not. We need more common sense, but I call it coaching. Where nurses are coaching you up, just like if you're doing Pilates or yoga or you're doing a gym class, if you have a coach out there coaching you up, people tend to work out harder and they get more results. So I'm going to be investing more money, I think, in nurses' involvement, especially in people that do have diabetes and hypertension and obesity, and trying to catch them early on as well. So I think it'd be good for medical school to have a little bit more of it, but I really think that nurses are going to solve the problem more so than doctors are.
Interesting. So one of the things that you've done is come up with a number of legislative proposals. You've introduced several bills. You also have the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act, which was moved out of the Senate Ag Committee. Where do some of these legislative vehicles stand, given that we're facing the potential, and we'll talk about this in a bit, government shutdown? You know, we've got, there's not many legislative days left for the end of the year. So are there decent prospects for some of these MAHA-type legislative vehicles to move in Congress yet this year? Or we think we're talking more 26 and beyond?
Yeah, so we're on Trump time now, and the president expects us to be moving some of them across the finish line. And so we have a package of bills that would address each one of those pillars. And obviously for this group, we'll kind of stay focused on the agriculture and nutrition as part of this. And I'm going to preface this by saying we also have a bill that would protect and preserve the use of fertilizers and chemicals, so the EPA could never take them away from us. I want us to use less of them, but I would like that to be part of a farm bill. But at the same time, we have a biostimulant bill. There's biostimulants, so in lieu of fertilizers and chemicals, there's natural organisms out there that we can put in the soil that will grab the nitrogen in the soil, or maybe grab more carbon out of the air, those types of things as well. So we have legislation that would impact that. We have legislation on preemption, meaning that if Kansas, we don't want Kansas and New York and California all write different rules for what's safe, what's generally recognized as safe as far as ingredients go. So I think the opportunity will be a farm bill, and if we get to do that this year or not. And then there's some of my other stuff. We oversee the FDA. Remember, the F in FDA doesn't stand for federal, it stands for food. And with Dr. McCary, I think we have an FDA administrator who's very much more focused on nutrition, as focused on nutrition as he is on a cure for everything else as well. So I think with the White House behind us, with Secretary Kennedy behind us, that there's a chance that we'll move some of them through. And then I'm going to yield to you and say that, yeah, you're right. Most of them is going to be a next year type of thing. But we'll do our best to start the momentum. It usually takes 5 years to get a bill, maybe 7 years to get a really good bill, a good one, through the whole process.
So last question on MAHA before we pivot a little bit is, what's your advice to people in this room about how they can be better engaged with MAHA advocates, given that Secretary Kennedy has recently said that he doesn't want to do any harm to the ag community. Previously, he said some things that have been fairly harmful to the ag community, but now he's saying we need them. We need to bring them along, work with them. So what's that look like? What's your advice for people here on how they do more outreach to?
Right. So I think that's a reflection of Secretary's education and the hard work that we've done trying to bring him on board with what modern day precision agriculture looks like. I think that's his response to this, that if you're practicing precision agriculture, you can decrease your fertilizers in chemicals 50-60%. You can decrease the drift from your fields by 90%. So I think number one is to embrace what I would call regenerative agriculture. Only 10% of farmers are probably really embracing it at this point in time. But then we have to make it affordable as well, because there is a little bit of expense And there may be a year or two of transition, but it's interesting, the folks that I talk to that are really doing it are having increased yields, and excited about that. So I think number one is embracing regenerative agriculture. I think number two is this education of the MAHA people. So when I met Secretary Kennedy and the MAHA group, they were all convinced that we were using glyphosate the day before we harvested wheat in Kansas. They really do, and that's what their books say. So I took the time to read maybe a dozen of the books of their leading authors. I think that's something that you owe it to yourself to do, is read what they're saying and then figure out, well, do we agree on the same goal? Where's the opportunity? Where can we meet in the middle on this? So I think this education that, no, it would be unusual for us to use glyphosate on wheat in Kansas, that we're checking residues. I've been to the flour mills and the different places where we're measuring for those residues as well. So I think it's an idea of not feeling, I try not to be threatened. I think that this is an opportunity. Next, listen to your customers. Listen to what people out there demand. I'm not driving this issue. Secretary Kennedy and I are not driving MAHA. The American public is driving it. When you talk to parents and grandparents, and 1 out of 31 children have autism, you got to sit there and say, well, what is causing this? So I think that we're responding to a real need, and as opposed to looking at threat, and looking at how you can embrace this. And what I'm really excited about, a lot of the MAHA goals with healthy soil are going to align for an economic opportunity for farmers and ranchers. And what I'm getting at is carbon credits. I really think that you're going to one day make as much, maybe more, from carbon credits as you do from selling corn. And I know for some farmers that's already true today. So I think that, where's the opportunity here? We want to leave the world cleaner, healthier, and safer than we found it. So this regenerative agriculture, to me, leads to healthy soil and less, and it keeps, makes soil a carbon sink. One more quick thing. I know this is a longer answer, but I think that we need to understand in agriculture what's the difference between organic farming and regenerative agriculture, and the advantages and disadvantages of each of those. So I've spent the last year trying to find the science of soil health. And what I learned are things that are pretty common sense. That when you talk about a carbon sink, the 3 biggest carbon sinks in the world are trees, the ocean, and the soil. So if you're doing organic farming, you have to plow the soil. So you're releasing all that carbon, and then also you're making the soil looser, so it's going to lead to more soil erosion and less ability to hold water. So those are some of the disadvantages of organic farming. So the advantages of regenerative agriculture is we're doing minimal till, and keeping that carbon sink in place. And then as you start practicing more regenerative agriculture practices, you're going to use less and less fertilizers. You're going to bring in manure that the dairies and the feedlots are glad to get rid of. And you're going to start adding cover crops. I was at a place yesterday, a young man out by Norton that is absolutely knocking it out of the park, where he's actually using drones to interseed soybeans and corn with a cover crop. It's already planted this time of the year. So he's using drones to fly over the fields before they have to harvest it, so that cover crops has a head start, and then he's connected to a carbon market to pay for that, and then some. So I see it all coming together. We've been kind of treading water here for 10 or 15 years, and what we don't want is the government forcing anything. We want it to be voluntary, but I think that it's time for agriculture to embrace regenerative agriculture and make this world cleaner, healthier, and safer than we found it. I'm going to keep going, sorry, but this is so exciting for me. Instead of just planting CRP anywhere, we need to be more precise where we're planting CRP, by planting filters where there's critical streams. Look, we've got waters of the U.S. kind of rolled back, but let's be responsible and plant the very most, whatever grabs and does the best filtering next to those streams we should be planting. And by the way, let's throw some stuff in there for the pollinators. We've lost half of our pollinators over the last year for one reason or another. So we can be smarter with the amount of money that we're spending in conservation.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating how energized you are by that. I know when I took over our Century Farm, one of the first things we did was switch to no-till and cover crops. But it's not cheap, and it's helpful if you can have a market that can counterbalance some of the investments that you have to make in conservation, because the USDA dollars aren't always there either to help you out. So let's switch to some of the other policy things, like the carbon intensity scores and the interest in 45Z. There was an extension in the One Big Beautiful Bill at a lower rate, but I was just at a conference earlier this week in Orlando, and we were so excited about sustainable aviation fuel a couple years ago, and now it's kind of slowed down. It's more expensive than conventional fuel, as you know, and people aren't quite sure how this model is going to be implemented so that people can take advantage of 45Z. Where do you see that all headed? Yeah. Are you still excited about the prospects?
So I think 45Z has the potential to consume more corn, soybeans, sorghum than ethanol does. That's the potential of it. And I think part of it depends on geology. So Kansas is blessed that we're going to be able to do 45Z and inject the carbon from that production of the ethanol or the jet fuel and inject it right into disposable wells. And some places don't have that. If you're having to ship the CO2 that you're making through a pipeline to another state, that's where I think a lot of the problems are going. Look, Europe, whatever America does, we don't know, but Europe is going to demand these biofuels for jet fuel. So I think it's an incredible market opportunity. Not every ethanol plant is going to be able to embrace it, and some fuels aren't going to be as a better carbon index score, intensity score, as another. So the details have to be written yet, but I'm very bullish on it. And like every new product, I think that some ethanol plants are going to succeed and some don't. Those ones that have been working on this for 3 or 5 years are ready to seize the moment. I think it's going to be really hard for an ethanol plant or a de novo group to sit there and say, let's get this stood up now. They got to, who knows what's going to happen in 2020, after 2029, I think is when these credits run out. But certainly there are some people out there that are full speed ahead.
And on the topic of renewable energy, a lot of folks in the corn industry would like to see year-round E15. Talk to us a little bit about your perspective on that.
Yeah, I think E15 should be the #1 priority of the administration right now. This should be our #1 ask. We should talk about trade if we want to in a little bit, but I'm just going to focus on corn for a second. So in an average year, we're exporting 2 billion bushels of corn. Now, the last several years, it's been less than that. This year, we're going to export 2.86 billion bushels of corn. So trade exports are up, but the price of corn is still down for a lot of different reasons. But it's not because of our trade policies. But think about this. If we went to year-round E15, we would increase corn consumption by 2.5 billion bushels of corn. So that would be doubling, our trade market. Whatever we're trading each year in corn, we would do that if we would go to year-round E15. So that's why it's so important. It's not going to cost the federal government anything. Actually, the scores is going to save them some money. It's going to save about $5 billion. I don't want to bore you with it. But our #1 ask of the administration is year-round E15. And anyone that cares about agriculture, all your groups, that should be the #1 ask of the White House right now, is to support a year-round E15 bill. And we'll put that amendment, whether it's in the National Defense Authorization Act or a CR, there's a lot of places we could slip that in. And it'll pass if the president just says go. That's all he's got to do is say go. And he's trying to, to balance the oil industry. So the oil industry for the past several years has had both of their barrels focused on EVs and all the climate energy stuff. Well, they've won that battle, at least temporarily. So now I kind of feel like my oil friends putting their barrels back on E15 a little bit. And in Kansas we have both, and that's why I've always been able to communicate with both the farmers and the oil people is, look, where's the win-win opportunity here? And I think that E15 is just a super win for the American farmer as well as the American in general. By the way, you would cut the pollution out of the tailpipe, I don't know, a third if you went from E10 to E15 as well.
So another policy thing that has come up on our questions is just what the rest of the Farm Bill. Obviously, there are a lot of provisions that were included in reconciliation, but we have several expiring programs that people are going to be wondering what's the future of those. given the extreme polarization right now and the fact that, we're facing a potential government shutdown, what are the prospects for a skinny or Farm Bill 2.0 yet this year?
Well, the great news is we've done most of the Farm Bill that's important to agriculture already. So for years, we wanted to fix crop insurance. So that is the backbone of every Farm Bill. We added $50 billion to the crop insurance portfolio. The next issue was the Title I funding for ARC and PLC, so we increased reference prices. I think the pro-growth small business incentives apply to agriculture as well, whether it's the 199A pass-through. Talk to your co-ops or your farmers how important that 199A pass-through is to them. I know it's important to you, as a lot of you as pass-through entities as well, but that's vitally important to them. Not to mention, you'd be surprised how many farmers are doing R&D and how important it is to be able to write off your interest as well as accelerated depreciation. And then we doubled the death tax limit. We took it from $15 to $30 million as well. So I think that the real thing is, the great news is we've taken care of that. Now, what's left in a Farm Bill? SNAP and the conservation things, which of course are important to me too. And there's other things, high-speed internet and rural economic development. The bottom line is the Ag Committee, I think, could pass something in a matter of weeks. And the question will be, because of the division, if Senator Schumer would allow us a vote on the floor on it. So is he willing to tank everything because Donald Trump's name's on it? I know this is going to get a little political, but this is the government shutdown issue right now. Let me just spend a minute talking about the government shutdown. You guys are businessmen and women here. You'll understand this. We've agreed to fund the government at the current levels of Joe Biden's budget. So last December, every Democrat in the Senate voted for a budget, and we've continued that on till now. Now, usually we're supposed to shift over to a President Trump budget right now, but we can't agree. So we said, all we're asking is you just to continue the same spending levels. No, they want another $1.5 trillion. They want to add $1.5 trillion of borrowing from your grandchildren to that budget, which is already bloated. Now, why aren't we negotiating? We have negotiated. We've negotiated over and over. We have an appropriations committee. They have 12 buckets of funding. So there's 12 buckets of funding, appropriations funding for the federal government. They have passed 8 of those 12 out of committee with scores of votes like 23-2 and 25-0. Every one of those have come out with super majorities, but Chuck Schumer won't release the votes to pass them on the floor. Now, we did get 3 of them done. So it's 87% of the funding has been done in committee at record speeds. It's been decades since someone has made this much progress this quick, despite all their jamming us on the nomination process. So it's all politics that would keep the Farm Bill from being done, is what I'm trying to say. Just like if this government shuts down, it's going to be because Chuck Schumer wants to shut it down. He has a very reasonable deal. 16 times under Joe Biden, Republicans walked the plank and agreed with their horrific budget to keep the government open. 16 times. I'll finish with this on this issue. This is the most important. This is the number one threat to the success of our country and our children's children is our national debt. $37 trillion. We're spending $3 billion a day on interest. It's actually 2.7, but $3 billion a day on interest. That's the number one threat to our country. And until Congress is willing to go on a diet here, we're going to continue down this road. And think about this. Pre-COVID, we were spending less than $5 trillion a year. Now we're spending $7. So we went from $5 to $7 trillion. The Democrats added all this emergency spending. And guess what? COVID's over. I think COVID's over. So why do we need to be continuing to spend at those bloated levels? And now they want to add another $1.5 trillion. So it's politics, Sarah, it's politics, and it's politics.
All right, so one last question for you on the topic of trade that has come up from our audience, and that is that the Secretary mentioned this as well. We didn't have any new trade deals during the last administration, but we've had announcements of trade deals, and a lot of people are still trying to figure out all the details behind those. We know that if Congress could get involved and bring back the authority to give up and down approval of trade deals, maybe we might have some really bigger approaches there as possibilities. What's the appetite, if any, to do something in Congress on trade deals? And what are you hearing about any of these details, especially as it might apply to your wheat, corn, and soybean farmers?
Right. So, first of all, I want to just emphasize, regardless of what happens on trade, American agriculture is going to succeed when we pass year-round E15, when we promote 45Z, when we turn corn into beef or soybeans into chickens or whatever it is, right? That's when American agriculture is going to succeed. Anyone that's sitting there, and this is, I think some of the national groups got this wrong, anyone that's sitting there thinking, oh, if we get all these trade deals done, that's going to solve all our problems is a muck. So I'm going to go back and remind you, we averaged 2 billion bushels of export of corn. This year is going to be 2.86. Wheat and soybeans, they're both going to be up 5 or 10% this year. Sorghum's a whole nother deal, right? Sorghum totally dependent upon China. The President and I discussed last week. He called me about something else. I said, Mr. President, if you do one thing for American agriculture that'd be an easy lift would be to get China to buy some sorghum. For $2 billion, you can move a lot of sorghum. That's not going to touch the corn issues. American agriculture needs to realize what Brazil is doing, what they're doing from a production level, what the rest of the world is doing. I can't make Brazil produce less. But what we can do is try to tell China, look, if you want us to buy all your TVs and your washing machines, then you need to buy corn from Kansas or from America. So that's the backsetting here. Is if you think that trade is going to solve all our woes, I think you're wrong. I think the focus needs to be turning corn, turning commodities into protein or to biofuels. Next, so the President has done 7 of our 10 major trade partners already. The framework, I agree, the details are pending. So he's done 7 of our 10 biggest trade partners, not done Taiwan, India, or China. Think about this. Taiwan just made a huge order. Last week. Taiwan needs us so badly. I'm not worried about Taiwan. India, we've never had a trade agreement with them, though I'd love to, but we've never had an agreement with India. And then lastly, China is China. We can spend the rest of the day. Anyone, it's a fool's market. It's fool's gold. If you build a market that you think is going to depend upon China from year to year, don't count me out. Okay, just count me out. I'm not going to invest in that. It's a huge opportunity. And regardless, so I'm going to push for the trade agreements. I want the trade agreements. I want all that to happen. But the focus on the trade agreements should be selling them ethanol. Should be selling them more beef. Those types of things. So the President gets an ethanol deal done in England. We're only using 20% of the tariff rate quota that we have going in there in ethanol. So now I need the ethanol companies, and they're doing it. They're going to go in there behind and try to get those ethanol deals done with England. So I think dairy would be another one that's a bright spot for trade opportunities as well. Whenever there's a value add part of anything, when we're turning those dairy products, cheese, yogurt, whatever it is, that's where the real opportunities are. So we're not going to sell a lot of wheat to India. The average farm in India is like 1.5 acres. They're a huge voting block, but we could sell them ethanol and maybe some dairy products. So I think we have to be much smarter about what we're doing and what we're trying to sell. But don't think that if we get these trade deals done, then it's going to solve the woes of agriculture. I think we probably should be more focused on our input costs, interest rates, right? Average farmer, $1 million interest operations loan, interest on farm machinery, et cetera. I think lowering the interest rates would have a big impact on them, and that goes back to point A. The interest rates are going to come down when we get our budget under control, right? So to me, they're all connected, Sarah. To me, it's all one problem. I'm the doctor. I want to know all the symptoms. I want to get consultations, but I see a path to victory. The path to victory, I think, is, again, the biofuels industry, the beef industry, dairy, those types of things.